Chapter 4. Ghost Cargo. The journey from Sector 7 to Echelon Apex Port became a reckless ballet of low-altitude maneuvers, each turn a daring challenge to gravity and authority alike. Finn urged the silly goose beyond anything Leon would have risked, threading her battered orange hull through the shimmering, tangled arteries of city traffic. Alarms from Draven traffic control blared and blinked, but he tuned them out, ducking behind glass giants to shake off any corporate eyes hunting the impounded freighter. As the hulking silhouette of Apex Port emerged through the haze, Finn killed the main thrusters. The ship glided on silent anti-grav repulsors, ghosting past sluggish corporate freighters and plunging toward the shadowed private docking rings below. He skipped the formalities of a bay request, steering straight for the vacant pad beside his own vessel. The silly goose landed in Bay 413 with a thunderous clang that rattled the deck. Her landing struts exhaled a sharp hiss as the ship settled into place. Finn exhaled, his breath trembling as he slumped into the battered leather of Leon's chair. The rush of the heist ebbed, leaving only a heavy, aching fatigue. Sweat slicked his brow as he ran his fingers through his hair, tugging at the stiff collar of the charcoal suit. Outwardly, he wore the mask of an Athelgard fixer. Inside, he felt like a man who'd sprinted through a marathon. He keyed the shutdown sequence, the engine's rattling roar dying away into a low, comforting hum. Finn reached for his wrist comm, ready to dive into the stolen flight logs, when a sudden flicker on the security monitors caught his attention. Someone was standing outside between the Goose and the Emerald. Finn's hand instinctively went for his blaster. He tapped the monitor, magnifying the image of the figure waiting patiently in the neon-soaked drizzle. He froze. His grip on the blaster loosened entirely. It wasn't an Athelgard cleanup crew. It wasn't Port Authority security. It was Amara. Finn hit the release for the primary loading ramp and hurried down the spiral companionway, the heavy fabric of his overcoat swishing against the metal steps. By the time he reached the bottom of the ramp, the cold, polluted air of Echelon was already washing into the cargo hold. Amara waited at the foot of the ramp, hands buried in the battered pockets of her pilot's jacket. Her vivid red hair, tied in a no-nonsense braid, glimmered under the harsh port lights. She was every inch the seasoned spacer, sharp, unyielding, and fiercely independent, a blockade runner who carved her own path through the stars. She was also the closest thing Leon had ever had to a serious, long-term relationship. Finn halted at the ramp's end, acutely conscious of the ridiculous corporate costume he wore. Amara didn't so much as smirk at the suit. Her green eyes, ringed with red, held none of their usual spark, only a deep, weary sorrow. Amara. Finn breathed, the name catching slightly in his throat. She didn't say a word. She simply closed the distance between them and threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his overcoat. Finn paused just a heartbeat, then pulled her close, holding tight. The sharp citrus of her perfume cut through Echelon's misery, grounding him in something achingly familiar. "I'm so sorry, Finn," Amara whispered against his shoulder, her voice thick and unsteady. She pulled back slightly, her hands resting on his arms as she looked up at him. "When I saw the official port registry update his status to deceased, I couldn't believe it. I burned hard from Vespera the second I saw the feed. I knew you'd be coming here." "I just got in today," Finn rasped, the grief swelling painfully in his chest again. He looked at her, his dark eyes searching her face. The sorrow was genuine, but there was a tight, nervous energy that he hadn't seen before. Finn knew Amara too well. She never appeared just to mourn. She was built for action, not sympathy. "You have something to tell me," Finn said quietly. Amara shot a wary glance over her shoulder, eyes flicking from the Emerald's looming hull to the frenetic, sparkling sprawl of the port. The icy drizzle was already seeping through her jacket. "Not out here," Amara murmured, her voice dropping to a tense whisper. Finn nodded sharply. "My ship. Come on." He hustled her across to the Emerald, thumbed his code into the panel, and the sleek airlock slid open, ushering them into the ship's warm, familiar refuge. Finn sealed the doors behind them with a solid, reassuring thud. He didn't stop in the sterile, utilitarian cargo bay. He led Amara straight up the companionway to the crew quarters. Entering the softly lit lounge, Finn exhaled deeply, shrugging off the overcoat and flinging it onto the battered couch. He popped open the collar of his black shirt, shedding the last traces of his corporate disguise. He crossed to the cabinet by his old record player, retrieving 2 crystal glasses and a bottle of deep red spiced wine, its label dusted with neglect. He'd saved it for a special night, though not one like this. He poured out 2 generous servings, passed one to Amara, and collapsed into the leather couch. Amara settled beside him, her chilled hands cradling the glass. She gazed into the swirling wine, the cabin's gentle light revealing every line of fatigue etched on her face. "To Leon," Finn said softly, raising his glass. "To Leon," Amara echoed, her voice trembling slightly. "The best, most stubborn pilot in the black." Their glasses met with a soft chime, the crystal ringing in the quiet cabin, and they drank deeply. The spiced wine was heavy and warming, cutting through the freezing chill of Echelon. Finn set his glass on the low table, leaning forward, resting his elbows on his knees. He looked at Amara, his dark eyes intense and entirely focused. "All right," Finn said, his voice low and serious. "What do you know?" Amara took another slow sip of the wine, her green eyes meeting his. "We hadn't spoken in over a year, Finn," Amara began, her voice tight with a mixture of regret and anxiety. "You know how it was with us. We burned bright, and then we burned out. We always stayed on good terms, but we kept our distance. We flew our own routes." She paused, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "But 2 days before he died," Amara continued, the words tumbling out in a rushed, quiet breath, "he contacted me on a heavily encrypted private frequency. He didn't use the standard Void Runner's comms. He bypassed the Echelon relay entirely." Finn's brow furrowed, a cold prickle of apprehension running down his spine. Leon was a meticulous pilot, but he rarely used military-grade encryption for personal calls unless he was actively hauling highly sensitive data. "What did he say?" Finn asked, his pulse quickening. "He didn't say much," Amara replied, her knuckles turning white around the crystal glass. "He sounded exhausted. And Finn, he sounded terrified. He told me he was hauling something off the books, something he shouldn't have touched. He said he needed to talk to someone he trusted implicitly, but he couldn't risk the local comms towers." Amara looked directly into Finn's eyes, the fear in her expression genuine and raw. "He said he was making a drop in Sector 7, Amara whispered. "And if he didn't check in within 48 hours, I needed to find you and tell you not to come to Draven." Finn stared at her, the warmth of the spiced wine instantly turning to ash in his stomach. "Was that all?" Finn asked, his voice tight. "Did he say what he was hauling?" Who the buyer was? Yes, that was all, Amara replied, shaking her head in frustration. He wouldn't say anything else over the comms, even encrypted. He just said he needed to talk, and that it was serious. He sounded like a man who knew he was running out of time. Finn sat back against the leather couch, running a hand over his slicked back hair, entirely forgetting he wasn't wearing his usual messy mop. He let out a long, ragged breath. Leon had known. He had walked into loading dock 44B, knowing it was a trap, or at least highly dangerous, and he had gone anyway. He didn't make it out of Sector 7, Finn rasped, the cold fury returning to his voice. Amara closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her cheek. She wiped it away furiously with the back of her hand. I know. When I saw the port registry, I knew he hadn't just had an accident. Leon doesn't have accidents. You're right, Finn said, leaning forward again, his dark eyes burning with intensity. He didn't. He quickly and methodically explained everything that had happened over the last 24 hours. He told her about the morgue, the trip to the polluted river in Sector 7, and planting the hidden camera. He described the Black Ops cleanup crew, the crushed synth holding the scrap, and the Athelgard corporate logo half-melted onto the Durasteel shipping container. Finally, he explained the audacious, highly illegal heist he had just pulled off at the impound lot, detailing his standoff with Erebus and his escape in the Silly Goose. Amara stared at him, her green eyes wide with a mixture of profound shock and genuine awe. She looked him up and down, taking in the sharp, charcoal suit and the black shirt. I did wonder about the clothes, Amara admitted, a faint, breathless laugh escaping her lips despite the horror of the situation. You were never exactly a smart dresser, Finn. I thought maybe you were going to a funeral. I was going to a robbery, Finn corrected grimly, unbuttoning his cuffs. Amara's fleeting smile disappeared, replaced by a jolt of panic in her eyes. She slammed her glass onto the table, wine sloshing over the rim. Finn, Amara breathed, standing up quickly, her pilot's instincts kicking into high gear. If I could find you, if I knew you would bring the Goose back to the Emerald's docking bay. Finn's blood ran cold. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Athelgard can find me, Finn finished the sentence for her, springing up from the couch. We have to move, Amara urged, already heading for the companionway hatch leading down to the cargo bay. And quick. If that Carver guy realizes you aren't one of his fixers, he's going to track the Goose's transponder straight to this pad. I need to slave the Goose's nav computer to the Emerald, Finn argued, grabbing his discarded dark overcoat and his heavy blaster. I can't leave Leon's ship here. It takes 20 minutes to properly slave a bulk freighter to a light runner, Finn, Amara shouted back over her shoulder, her boots ringing loudly on the metal grating. We don't have 20 minutes. They will be on their way here right now. Finn halted at the top of the companionway, jaw locked. He fingered the data spike in his pocket, the sole record of Leon's last flight. His gaze flicked from the Emerald, his sanctuary, to the silent orange hulk of the Silly Goose glistening in the rain outside. Amara was right. If they stayed to link the ships, Athelgard would trap them both on the ground. I can fly the Goose, Amara said firmly, stopping at the bottom of the ramp and looking up at him. The panic in her eyes had been entirely replaced by absolute steely determination. My blockade runner is docked at Relay 9, but right now, we need to get both of these ships out of Draven's atmosphere. Finn wavered for a heartbeat. The Silly Goose was all he had left of Leon. Letting someone else take the controls felt like letting go of his brother. "We can head for my ship at Relay 9, Amara continued, her voice softening just a fraction, sensing his hesitation. "It's off the corporate grid, but you have to trust me, Finn." Finn glanced down at the fierce pilot who had loved Leon. The answer was already in his bones. "I do," Finn rasped, holstering his blaster and hitting the release for the Emerald's primary loading ramp. "Lead the way." Amara didn't waste another second. She sprinted down the ramp, her boots splashing loudly through the oily puddles, heading straight for the airlock of the Silly Goose. Finn spun toward the Emerald's cockpit, mind whirring through the pre-flight sequence. But halfway up the companionway, a gut-wrenching thought froze him in place. Leon. His brother was still lying on a freezing Durasteel slab in Sector 4. Finn gripped the cold metal handrail, his knuckles turning white. How could he just leave him there? How could he light the thrusters and burn for the void, knowing Leon's body was trapped in a sterile corporate morgue, waiting to be tossed into an anonymous city incinerator if the fees went unpaid? He closed his eyes, the roar of the port traffic outside fading into a suffocating silence. Behind closed eyes, Finn conjured Leon, not the shattered body from the coroner's file, but the man alive in memory. Standing tall in the Goose's cockpit, cheap cigar gripped in his teeth, laughter booming over the engine's roar. Can I really leave him behind? Finn wondered, grief threatening to drown every ounce of resolve. Then, clear as a comms transmission, he pictured Leon's response. He could almost hear his brother's rough, practical drawl echoing in the empty corridor of the Emerald. "Yes, you can, brother. I am elsewhere. Worry about the living. Save yourself and Amara." Finn opened his eyes, the crushing weight lifting just a fraction. Leon was right. The body in Sector 4 wasn't his brother anymore. It was just an empty shell. But the people who had killed him were very, very real, and they were hunting the living. And then, a cold, brilliant, and utterly ruthless idea struck him. Finn sprinted the rest of the way up to the flight deck, throwing himself into the pilot's chair. He didn't initiate the launch sequence. Instead, he slammed his hand down on the primary comms panel, routing a direct, unencrypted signal through the local echelon relay. He punched in the public directory number for the central morgue in Sector 4. The line hissed and popped with static for a few agonizing seconds before the bored, nasally voice of the clerk answered. "Central Morgue. State your business." Finn took a deep breath, dropping the smooth, arrogant corporate persona he had used all day. He let the raw, exhausted grief of the spacer bleed back into his voice. "This is Finnick Crow," Finn rasped, his throat tight. "I was in your facility earlier today regarding the remains of a courier. Leon Crow." The clerk's tone shifted instantly, recognizing the barely suppressed anger from earlier. Yes, sir. I remember. You didn't sign the release forms." "Plans have changed," Finn interrupted, his voice hard. "I'm coming back for him. Have my brother's body prepared for collection in the next hour." "Sir, you still need to process the paperwork with the sector magistrate." "I don't care about the paperwork," Finn snarled, leaning heavily over the analog console. "I'm paying in untraceable physical credits, and I am taking him off this miserable rock tonight. Have him ready." He cut the connection before the clerk could stammer out an objection. Finn sagged into the pilot's chair, heart pounding. This was a wild, reckless gamble. If Athelgard and Carver were monitoring the Port Authority comms, And if they were trying to scrub every trace of Leon's murder, that unencrypted transmission would light up their surveillance grid like a supernova. They would hear the victim's brother aggressively demanding the body. They would assume the rogue element that had stolen the silly goose was heading straight for Sector 4 to collect the corpse before fleeing the system. Leon was going to help them escape one last time. He was going to be the perfect diversion. Finn wasted no time. He seized the flight yoke and punched the ignition. The Emerald thundered awake, sublight engines thrumming with pent-up energy. Through the viewport, Finn watched the silly goose's orange hull rise from the pad, Amara guiding her into a steady hover. "Let's fly, brother," Finn whispered to the empty cockpit. He shoved the thrusters forward, launching the Emerald into Echelon's smog-choked sky, burning hard for the stars.